Okay, so I have ground to ground. This ground is coming off of the actual light, and this ground up at the top here is coming off of the bike. This yellow and this blue wire are also coming off of the bike. That's that rear harness for our brake lights. And then, yeah, I've got these two all connected. Now let's go ahead and turn on the bike. Great, and awesome, we've got power. And that's our DRL brake light, and then if we hit our brakes, boom, it gets lighter. All right, so we're probably around 75, maybe about halfway there. We're gonna have to do the blinkers now, and we're gonna have to do them for the front and the back. And that is gonna be using this harness right here. So a bit more soldering to do, a bit more connecting to do. These wires also, remember, are really long. We're gonna end up trimming them down. I just wanted to kind of do this as a test run, so I'll probably break these two off. I'll probably actually wire it all through the bike and break these connectors. I have a bunch of them. You should have a bunch of them just lying around too. And we'll get these all measured out to a proper length that isn't this ridiculous amount of wire. So I calipered out the width of this light, or the peg for the light really, or post, and it is about 8 millimeters. So we're gonna wanna find an 8 millimeter drill bit basically. I bought these on Amazon, and so I'll just go in and measure, kind of, get an idea of what I think size is, and then just measure out what whether or not this is 8 millimeters. This guy is 6, so it's a pretty hefty base that we're gonna make for. Okay, time for a fun part. So we're gonna be drilling about a 7 millimeter hole right in the center of this Onyx logo. So sad, I know, right? The base of the light that we're gonna use is pretty wide, so unfortunately you can't put it over here, so you literally want to go directly in the center of this logo. And so I have a small kind of pre-made punch that I made right there, and that's just going to help my drill bit. Obviously it's a pilot hole kind of to some degree, and then yeah, I'll just go at it with the drill for a little bit and open up a hole, and then I'll be able to thread my light through there. So I needed to do a bit of tinkering with the hole that I made because the handlebars were in the way, so I couldn't really drill a straight hole. That was fine. I went in with a round ball burr that you could use on a Dremel basically, to clean up the hole a bit. And now I have a pretty much perfect hole. So there might be a little bit of fitting you need to do in order to get this guy in here, but generally things are looking really good, so you kind of get the idea. But the cool thing about this is the hole I got was super perfect in terms of the diameter, so it actually threaded through that hole at first, but anyways, it goes right on and it's totally flush and it looks super good. You can barely see it, which I just love, but these lights are super bright. And then obviously, we'll end up feeding it down through this monstrosity. And I've done it on both sides, so we're all good to go now. And this was about like a 6.5 millimeter, maybe 7 millimeter drill bit. So you could go a bit bigger. There is a locking nut on the other side of these, so you'll get a tight fit pretty much regardless of the hole size, as long as you don't go too crazy with it. But I'm really happy with this. So I went ahead and trimmed the tail light down to about 6 feet, and I'm gonna glue this light onto the back of my seat. And one really important thing to keep in mind is that when you go to take your seat off again, you have enough slack on your wire here to put your seat like basically down on the ground, or you don't want to cut this thing too short, and when you pull your seat off, you end up ripping off what you glued on there, since this doesn't come off anymore once you glue it on. There's all sorts of ways you could do it. The glue just seemed the cleanest, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So this is about 6 feet of wire, probably more than I need, but you always want to cut more, and then you can always trim down at the end. All right, moving on to actually feeding the wire through the bike. And this is just standard kind of electrical wire protector. And I decided to just kind of test fit everything to make sure that I have enough back here and enough up here, and I totally do. So now I'm going to start moving on to kind of soldering stuff together, connecting stuff together, and testing everything. So there's a ground wire that's coming off of the DC that you're going to want to just go ahead and cap off. Actually, we don't need this wire, and you don't want a ground wire just kind of empty sitting around. So pretty easy solution to that is just taking some heat shrink and then just shrinking it around that to protect it from touching anything. So the material here is quite thin, and when you go to actually screw in your light, there's only a certain amount of screw or thread actually on the light, and the result is this gap right here, and ultimately your light, is not properly bolted on. So you can of course buy a washer. Go and buy a washer. I'm a bit of a DIYer, as you can probably see. I made this little thing out of a dime. This is like a redneck washer, if that's not already a term, I'm coining it. But basically, you would put the washer on the inside here, and it'll make sure that it fits nice and snug and doesn't move at all, and that's exactly what this little guy does. So go ahead and buy washers before you do this. You probably need them about, 2 or 3 millimeters thick. So let's go ahead and get your lights actually screwed on with the washer on there, and then thread your left and right turn signal lights through. You remember that electrical protector on the backside harness? I'm gonna reuse that for these lights, so I just threaded it through, and then we're gonna take these wires from our left and right turn signal and thread them through the bike, probably somewhere down here. So it's a good idea to mark off your different turn signals in some way that identifies which one is which. So I have the right side, the blue side is my right side, and then my left side is yellow. Now it's time to solder our wires coming off the bike together. This is kind of one of those just do as I say, don't ask any questions type of thing. Just solder green to green and this pink to the red. So now we're moving on to probably one of the hardest parts, and that is soldering a total of 4 wires together. They're all ground wires. So this is the ground wire coming off of my back tail light. This is the ground wire coming off of one of my front blinkers. This is the ground wire coming off another one of my front blinkers. And then finally, this is the ground wire actually coming off of my bike, and it's through this harness here. So we got to get all 4 of those together. Probably a pretty challenging solder, but all in all, gonna be totally worth it. All right, before you solder, don't forget to slip on your heat shrink. So I'm about to brush this with flames, but we've got all wires soldered together now. Yippee. Next soldering job is going to be yellow wire coming off of your tail light, and red wire coming off of your front turn signal, and green wire off of your tail light and your front turn signal red wire as well. Make sure you give these a test before to make sure you're soldering the 2 together. So like this is my left side, and I know that because when I tested, I got my left side blinking on the back and on the front as well. So make sure to test that before you solder these together. You can also just flip the light, remember, kind of too, like it just really depends on how you're wiring them together. So kind of confusing, but just touch stuff together and you'll be all right. So this is the combo we're gonna go with here for left and right side flash. So we got the pink and the red coming off into this, and then green and red. Okay, only a couple steps left to go really, and that is take your wires and alligator clip them. So those alligator clips are these guys that allow you can stick our soldered wires together through this hole, and then you can stick the top of this onto the relay. so as you can see here. And this is working perfectly. I would use the blues, the gauge of kind of the combined wire now, while it used to fit pretty well in the yellow, now fits a bit better and more snug in the blue. So that's that 14 gauge, I guess, right there. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and use the blues and kind of clamp all this stuff up. I'll show you what the final result looks like, but we're pretty much at the finish line. I'm actually gonna go ahead and solder these together. I just enjoy soldering, but you can totally just use a standard clamp for these. So like something like this, where it's just 2 wire holes on either side and then crunch in the middle. Like I said, I enjoy soldering, so I'll solder both of these wires together, and then your entire setup is good to go. I still have some work to do on actually attaching this to my seat, and I'm gonna glue it to the underside. So you can either sign off of this video if you'd like now, or continue to watch on while I attach the seat. So finally, we want to connect our tail light, and the options you have here are the DRL and the brake light. And so the brake light is going to be this red to blue, and then the DRL tail is going to be the white to yellow. So you're just going to want to either connect these together or solder them up. I'm going to go ahead and solder them. Okay, team, so to finish off this video, I'm just actually super gluing this tail light onto the back of my seat, and I'm gonna install something to kind of brace it along right here, but I've put some kind of tack style welds down with super glue to kind of place it where I want before I go in and do the final glue. And the one I'm using is kind of more of like a super glue epoxy. I forget who it's by, but I'll post a link in the video. And then I took a heat gun to this and kind of tacked it down a little bit, and then really molded it once it got nice and kind of hot, the light that is, to the shape of the seat. And it worked out really well. And even right now, this thing is pretty well stuck on there, but I'm obviously gonna go in and hit it with a bunch more glue so it's really on there. And then as far as the rest of this wire goes, I'm gonna probably tuck it up in there and then just zip tie it all around, and hopefully I don't get too much like rattle when I'm hitting bumps and stuff like that. But otherwise, that's it. This is the end of the video. I'm sure I skipped a couple of steps. Feel free to comment on any parts of this install that you didn't understand, and I'll try and walk you through it. I know it's really tough stuff. Electrical is not easy. I had never done this before. I hadn't even soldered before. So I've soldered it other ways. I'm a jeweler, so I do that a lot. So I was pretty comfortable with the soldering iron, but it's still a new thing that I was learning. But this is it, and I mean, it is a super clean design. I was originally going to use the rear rack from Onyx and mount it to this, but this was at the request, or kind of at the ideation that Gambles had. He just super glued it to the back of this thing, and I just fell in love with it. So awesome work to you, man. Thanks for kind of coaching me through all this. Angela, you've been super helpful as well. The whole Onyx crew has definitely supported me getting this thing done, and it looks super duper good. Here are the blinkers on. Boom, got that guy in. This guy's going. And that is it, my friends. Hope you enjoyed.